Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be jumping back to 2004 to unpack a film that really kind of predicted a lot of the digital anxieties that we're all grappling with today, and that's Paranoia 1.0. You might know it by its other title, 1.0. It's a cult classic that kind of flew under the radar for many.
Yeah.
But for those who found it, well, let's just say it tends to stay with you.
It definitely does. It's one of those films that really gets under your skin and sticks with you long after you've seen it. What's remarkable about Paranoia 1.0 is that it tapped into these anxieties surrounding technology and privacy when they were just emerging, you know?
Right.
Now, in the age of constant connectivity, these themes hit even harder, I think.
Yeah. And the film wastes no time setting that mood right from the start.
Oh, absolutely.
We meet Simon, a programmer living in this incredibly rundown apartment building.
Right.
It's all grimy, claustrophobic, filled with shadows.
Oh, sure.
Honestly, the building feels like a character itself, a visual representation of Simon's mental state.
That's a great observation. I think you're right. The setting isn't just a backdrop in this film. It's actively working to create this pervasive sense of unease and isolation that hangs over the entire film.
Right.
Everything feels like it's decaying from the physical space to Simon's grasp on reality.
And then things take a turn for the weird when Simon starts receiving these empty packages.
Yeah.
No explanation, no sender, just empty boxes showing up at his door. I don't know about you, but if that started happening to me, I'd be a little freaked out.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It plays into this feeling of being controlled by unknown forces, you know? It's as if Simon is being manipulated, but he has no idea by who or why.
Right.
The lack of explanation just amplifies the paranoia.
Yeah, and it reminds me of those targeted ads that pop up online, you know?
Yeah.
Like, how did they know I was even thinking about that? It's that unsettling feeling of being watched and analyzed without your consent.
It's very unsettling. And this film was made before that was really a thing. So it's interesting how they were tapping into that anxiety even back then.
Yeah. But before we get too distracted by algorithms, let's get back to those packages. They definitely set Simon on edge.
Right.
And then his interactions with the other residents of the building don't exactly help.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever met a neighbor who made you feel truly uneasy?
Well, Simon's neighbor, Derek, definitely fits that description.
Oh, yeah.
Udo Kier gives this fantastically creepy performance.
You know, he's so good.
He really is. Derek has this unsettling obsession with milk.
Yes.
Drinking it, bathing in it, even offering it to Simon in a way that feels almost threatening.
It's more than unsettling. It's downright bizarre. Milk, which we typically associate with purity and nourishment, is suddenly transformed into something sinister.
Right.
What do you make of that?
It's such a clever way for the filmmakers to illustrate the idea that even the most basic everyday things can be corrupted or manipulated, you know? This theme of distrust permeates the entire film right down to something as simple as a glass of milk. It reinforces the idea that nothing is safe, nothing is pure.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
It's like the film is saying that we can't take anything for granted. Even the things we think of as good or innocent could be twisted into something sinister.
Exactly. And that ties into one of the film's central themes, surveillance.
Right.
Everywhere Simon looks, he sees cameras, feels watched, and suspects that even the objects in his apartment are spying on him.
Yeah, it's that constant feeling of being under surveillance, of having no privacy, that the film captures so well. But here's the thing. This film came out in 2004.
Right.
Long before smartphones and smart homes were commonplace.
That's what makes it so prescient. The filmmakers were tapping into these anxieties about technology and privacy before they became mainstream concerns.
Right.
Now we're living in a world where our every move is tracked, our data is collected, and our online experiences are shaped by algorithms. Like, they could see the future.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much control do we really have over our information in this digital age? It feels like Paranoia 1.0 is offering us a glimpse into our future, and it's not exactly a comforting one.
And the film doesn't shy away from exploring the psychological impact of this constant surveillance. Jeremy Sisto, who plays Simon.
Oh, he's brilliant.
He is fantastic.
Yeah.
He does an incredible job of conveying that descent into paranoia and anxiety. You know, he's not some kind of action hero. He's an ordinary guy.
Right.
Caught in extraordinary circumstances, which makes his breakdown all the more believable and unsettling.
You really feel for him, right?
Right.
It's not hard to imagine ourselves in his shoes, feeling increasingly isolated and powerless as the walls close in. And it's not just the technology that's unsettling.
Right.
The supporting characters, particularly Lance Henriksen as the enigmatic Howard, contribute to this feeling of unease.
Each supporting character, in their own way, embodies aspects of surveillance control and corporate greed. You know, take Howard, for instance. He's shrouded in mystery, seemingly pulling strings from the shadows. He embodies this shadowy corporate power that's manipulating Simon, perhaps even influencing his thoughts.
Right.
It's never stated outright, which adds to the paranoia.
And this theme of corporate control is also reflected in the film's visual style. The color palette is dominated by these rusty browns, greens, and deep shadows. Even the cityscape feels oppressive and inescapable.
The filmmakers use confined spaces brilliantly to amplify the tension.
Yes.
Whether he's in his cramped apartment, navigating the dark hallways of the building, or venturing out into the equally oppressive cityscape.
It's like he can't escape.
There's no escaping the sense of being watched and controlled.
Right. It's like the world itself is closing in on him, reflecting his shrinking sense of agency. And let's not forget the sound design. It's incredibly effective in creating this unsettling atmosphere.
Absolutely.
There isn't much of a traditional score.
Right.
But everyday noises, footsteps, distant chatter, the hum of machinery are amplified to create a constant feeling of unease.
It's a masterclass in using sound to build suspense. You know, instead of relying on loud jump scares, the filmmakers use these subtle creeping sounds to keep the audience on edge, mirroring Simon's heightened state of paranoia.
It totally works. The film really gets under your skin.
It does.
You feel trapped right along with Simon.
But before we get too deep into the film's unique aesthetic, there's a bit of trivia that I think adds to the overall feel.
Oh.
Paranoia 1.0 was a co-production between the U.S. and Romania.
Interesting.
Which isn't your typical Hollywood pairing.
That's a great point. That unusual collaboration gives the film a slightly surreal, almost foreign feel that adds to its overall sense of unease. The setting feels familiar, yet somehow off-kilter, like a distorted reflection of our own world.
Right, and it's just a really interesting detail that I think a lot of viewers might miss. You know what else is interesting?
What's that?
The filmmakers have mentioned David Cronenberg and David Lynch as influences.
Oh, wow.
And you can definitely see their stylistic fingerprints in the film's blend of psychological suspense, strange characters, and I'll just say things get a little weird at times.
Yeah, there are definitely elements of body horror and psychological thriller blended in,
creating this unsettling, almost nightmarish quality. But Paranoia 1.0 manages to take those influences and create something unique. You know, it's a film that stands on its own, and it's become even more relevant as technology has advanced.
So we've laid the groundwork, explored the setting, and touched on the themes of surveillance and corporate control that run through Paranoia 1.0.
Right.
But we've only scratched the surface.
We have.
What about those empty packages? What do they represent? And who is this shadowy corporation that seems to be lurking behind the scenes?
Those are excellent questions,
Wow.
and we'll delve into those and more in part 2 of our deep dive. Welcome back. So let's dive a little deeper into some of those intriguing elements we touched on earlier.
Okay, so those empty packages Simon keeps receiving, they really creep me out. It's like the ultimate unboxing video gone wrong. I mean, nothing inside. It feels almost symbolic.
It's definitely more than just a plot device, I think. Those packages become a visual representation of the emptiness and lack of control that's consuming Simon's life. You know, think about it. He's constantly receiving things he didn't ask for, things with seemingly no purpose.
Right.
It mirrors the way we often feel bombarded by information and products in the digital age.
That's such a good point. It's like those targeted ads that follow you around online.
Exactly.
Things you never ask for, but keep showing up, shaping your experience.
Yeah.
Maybe the filmmakers were onto something there.
Right. It raises questions about consumerism and the forces that shape our desires, you know? Are we really making choices, or are we being subtly manipulated by algorithms and marketing strategies? Paranoia 1.0 doesn't offer any easy answers, but it certainly makes you think.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about unsettling symbolism, what about Derek and his creepy obsession with milk? I mean, milk is usually associated with wholesomeness.
Yeah.
But in Paranoia 1.0, it becomes something off.
That's one of the things I find so fascinating about the film is how it takes everyday objects and twists them into something sinister. The milk, which should represent nourishment and purity, becomes almost menacing in Derek's hands. It's as if he's trying to force this symbol of innocence onto Simon,
Right.
but in a way that feels threatening and controlling.
You know, it makes me think about how we're constantly being sold products, told they'll make us happy or fulfilled, but ultimately they can leave us feeling empty and wanting more.
Yeah.
Is the film making a commentary on how consumerism can be just as manipulative as surveillance?
I think you're onto something there. The The film is definitely playing with those ideas, blurring the lines between our desires and the forces that shape them. It's not just about technology, it's about the systems that control us, whether it's through surveillance or through consumerism.
And speaking of control, the city itself feels like another character in the film. It's this oppressive, labyrinthine environment full of dark alleys and hidden corners. It almost feels impossible for Simon to escape both physically and mentally.
The city becomes a visual representation of Simon's psychological state. It's claustrophobic, isolating, and filled with a sense of constant surveillance. It's a world where everyone feels like a suspect and no one can be trusted.
It's like a physical manifestation of the panopticon.
Right.
That architectural concept where you're always potentially under surveillance. For those who haven't heard of it, the panopticon is a circular prison design where the guard tower is in the center, allowing guards to see into every cell, but the prisoners can't see into the tower. It creates this constant sense of being watched, even if you don't know if you actually are.
Exactly. It's the idea that the potential for surveillance is enough to control behavior. You never know who's watching or why, which creates a constant sense of anxiety and paranoia.
And that anxiety is only heightened by the way technology is used in the film. We see cameras everywhere, computers monitoring Simon's every move, and hints of subliminal messaging and mind control.
Yeah, it's interesting how the film blends these futuristic elements with this gritty, almost retro aesthetic. The technology doesn't feel sleek and modern. It feels outdated, decaying, almost like a relic from a bygone era. But that somehow makes it even more unsettling.
I agree. It reinforces the idea that technology isn't inherently good or bad. It's all about who controls it and how it's used. And in Paranoia 1.0, technology is clearly being used to manipulate and control, not to empower or liberate.
Right. And this brings us back to the question, who is behind all of this? The film never explicitly reveals the true nature of the corporation that seems to be pulling the strings.
Right.
But it hints at this vast and shadowy network of power.
It's like they're saying the enemy is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. That ambiguity just adds to the film's overall feeling of dread and paranoia.
Exactly. It taps into that primal fear of the unknown and the uncontrollable, It's the fear of being manipulated by forces. We can't comprehend forces that may be shaping our thoughts and actions without our knowledge or consent. And honestly, doesn't that feel relevant today?
Oh, absolutely. We're living in a world where data is collected on us constantly, where algorithms track our every move, where targeted advertising seems to know our deepest desires. Before we do, Paranoia 1.0 feels like a warning, a glimpse into a future where technology has eroded our privacy and autonomy.
And it's a warning we would be wise to heed. The film is urging us to be more critical of the technology we use, the information we consume, and the forces that shape our lives. It's a call to be more aware, more vigilant, and more protective of our own agency.
So where do we go from here? If Paranoia 1.0 paints such a bleak picture, is there any hope for reclaiming our privacy and autonomy in this increasingly digital world?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore as we discuss the film's ending and its lasting impact in the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Paranoia 1.0. We've talked about the themes of paranoia, surveillance, and corporate control, but there's one big piece of the puzzle we haven't quite unpacked yet.
Yeah.
The ending, I have to admit, it left me with more questions than answers.
That's the brilliance of it, isn't it? The ending of Paranoia 1.0 is as ambiguous as the rest of the film. We see Simon confront Howard, the mysterious figure who seems to be at the heart of everything.
Right.
But even then, we're left wondering, is Howard real or just a figment of Simon's fractured psyche?
It's such a mind-bending moment. And then there's that final scene where Simon escapes the city and joins this off-the-grid community, rejecting technology for a simpler life. But even then, I was left wondering, is this real freedom or just another form of control?
That's the question that lingers, right? Has Simon truly broken free, or has he simply traded one system of control for another? It's like those Escape the Algorithm documentaries.
All right.
Do they really offer an escape, or are we just falling into a different algorithm, a different echo chamber?
It's a chilling thought. Is there any escaping these systems that shape our lives? Even when we think we're making our own choices, is it possible we're being manipulated in ways we don't even understand?
The film doesn't shy away from that uncomfortable possibility that true freedom might be an illusion. But, it's not just about presenting a bleak dystopian vision. It's about prompting us to question our assumptions and to be more critical of the forces that shape our lives.
So why should we care about a film that was made over 2 decades ago? How does Paranoia 1.0 resonate with us today?
Because the themes of the film are even more relevant now than they were in 2004. Think about it. We live in a world of constant surveillance. Our
Right.
data is collected and analyzed by corporations, governments, everyone. We're targeted by personalized advertising, fed curated news feeds, and guided by algorithms that shape our online experiences. The lines between reality and simulation are blurring more and more each day.
It's like the film was a prediction and not a particularly optimistic one.
Mm-hmm.
It serves as a powerful reminder that technology can be used for both good and evil, and that we need to be aware of how it's being used and who benefits from it.
It's also a reminder that we have a responsibility to protect our privacy and autonomy. We need to be critical of the information we consume, the choices we make, and the systems we participate in.
It's not about rejecting technology outright, right? It's
Yeah.
about using it wisely, understanding its potential pitfalls, and taking steps to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
It's about reclaiming our agency in a world that's increasingly designed to control us.
Exactly. Paranoia 1.0 might be a work of fiction, but it holds a mirror up to our own anxieties and encourages us to think critically about the world we're creating. It challenges us to ask, what kind of future do we want? And how can we shape it in a way that preserves our freedom and humanity?
Those are powerful questions to consider, and ones that I'm definitely going to be thinking about long after this deep dive. This film has really stayed with me.
And that's the mark of a truly great film, isn't it? One that sparks conversation, challenges our assumptions, and stays with us long after the credits roll.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Paranoia 1.0. We hope this conversation has given you a new appreciation for this thought-provoking film and maybe even inspired you to seek it out or revisit it.
And if you do, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Join the conversation online. Let us know what resonated with you, what scared you, what made you think. Because ultimately, the most important part of a deep dive isn't just absorbing information. It's engaging in critical thinking and sharing those insights with others.
Thanks for joining us on this unsettling and thought-provoking journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and as always, keep diving deep.